So, good morning or good night, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to another interview of the Shield Dude on a Couch. I'm your host, Hector, and today I have Joe Stump. You may know him because he plays guitar in the band Alcatraz, but also he's got his own thing, and he's putting out his new album, Joe Stump and the Tower of Babel on July the 4th. And the of the album is Days of Thunder. So we have Joe with us today. So first of all, Joe, how are you today?
Good, good, always good. As I say, being Joe Stump's a pretty good deal.
Oh,
I,
well, yeah, that's a good thing. And I like that you have all the pictures in the background of
yeah, I
like.
got I got Richie over here and Ingve over here, and then over there on the over there on my right, on that side of the room, I got a bunch of Hendrix stuff, some Gary Moore over there. Yeah, so surrounded by all my heroes.
Yeah, and for this album, you channeled, you said that you channeled a lot of your heroes because this is a very like guitar driven, like 80s sounding type of record. So tell me a little bit about what you meant by that.
Well, the record very much is like, very much in the vein of like Rainbow and Deep Purple. It's almost like, if Rainbow had continued and made a record, in this day and age, this is maybe what it would sound like, So 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 the whole record it's got a heavy Richie Blackmore influence, Rainbow influence, Purple influence, and then you have like some of the other things I love, whether it's some of the early Dio stuff, whether it's from Dream Evil or Holy Diver and Last in Line. Days of Thunder kind of reminds me of something like the track Days of Thunder, almost that kind of vibe to it, or some of some of the classic Michael Schenker stuff, or some of that Uli John Roth era Scorpions, or different things like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the name of of this album, the Tower of Babel, is there a story behind that?
Yes, there actually is. The story is, I was thinking of a name for the band, and I was thinking of a name for the band, and I knew the band had like, Rainbow and Purple, like that was the direction and the vibe of the band. And what Tower of Babel actually is, what Tower of Babel actually is a very famous. Of course, you have the whole, obvious thing, but like the way I came up with it is it's a very famous Rainbow bootleg of recording. It's like a 3 CD set of the recordings of the early Dio era Rainbow. It's like a 3 CD set of their rehearsals, rehearsing for their first tour. With Dio and Cozy Powell and Richie and stuff. So that's where I got so the name actually comes from the famous Rainbow bootleg.
Okay, yeah, yeah. But I was thinking it can be the obvious reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So which I think is cool, So it kind of makes sense when you hear the music.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense when you listen to the music. So uh, when you're doing your own thing, how do you approach? Because you have a like a signature guitar sound. How do you approach like the riffing on this type of project differently that you do, like let's say with Alcatraz?
Well, this record much more so. I mean, I've used like, yeah, like this record much more so than with Alcatraz is kind of walks the line between hard rock and metal. So I'm using like a slightly more different, slightly different guitar tone, not as metal, not as aggressive sounding, a little bit more classic, more classic hard rock kind of tone, not quite as heavily overdriven, where most of the stuff I do with Alcatraz is very, occasionally, like there was a tune on Five called House of Lies that was like a very rainbowish type of track, where I had a similar tone that I have on this record. But this record, very much, more of kind of, like I said, walks the line between hard rock and metal, where most of the stuff I do with Alcatraz is strictly much more metal riffage and a heavier tone and everything.
Yeah, no, and this record has a lot of like different guitar solos, in different styles. So, do would you say, what? Let's say, which one do you have a favorite like guitar part that you did on this record?
I have like favorite tunes I really like. I really like Rules of Silence. You know what I mean? I love the riff. I love the riff and the solos, kind of like that wild kind of, flying by the seat of your pants kind of Blackmoreish thing. And I love and I love the solo in Alone in the Desert. That's like very much, what am I vibing there? Kind of like the Gates of Babylon, kind of stargazer, kind of Eastern kind of thing during the solo section. So I love playing that kind of thing. And then you have like the faster tracks like Sacrifice and Princess, where where there I'm like letting it go a little bit, where you have some of the Blackmoreisms mixed with some of the some of the ripping, Ingve influence shredding. But then you have like that tune, "Trust Me," which is like like a slower bluesier type of thing, where what am I vibing there? Like like the varying. What was I thinking there? The varying live version when I was during the solo, like the varying great live versions of "Mistreated" from Made in Europe, live in Graz, or the Rainbow Live on Stage one. I mean, I'm a huge Blackmore fanatic, so it's not like I'm taking licks from those solos, but I'm kind of channeling. Usually, a lot of times when I'm playing, it's coming out like me, but I'm channeling. One of my, bits of my heroes, whether it's a classical thing or what neoclassical thing, or bluesier thing or hard rock thing or whatever.
Yeah, and you mentioned "Trust Me." That's like the longest track on the record. That's like a 7.5 minute track. So, and I actually wrote it down because it has like a very like driven like guitar part in that like a solo that I think is one of the longest on the record. And yeah, you mentioned that a lot of the songs that I had here like notes for. The other one I wrote that first I thought before I listened to the track it was going to be a cover was "In the Heat of the Night." I don't know why I thought it was going to be a Whitesnake cover. I think there's a Whitesnake song called similar to that, but I can't remember now.
Oh, really? With the same title.
I, or it's something that I don't know. I can't remember right now, out of the top of my head, but it kind of like like it's kind of similar. So at first I thought it was a cover, but I heard it. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not a cover. It's an original track. Uh, so when you were going to pick the single for this, how did you? What did you decide on Days of Thunder?
For the first single, I mean, the record company really liked it, and they thought it was like super strong. So I was like, okay, fine with me. One of my favorite, yeah, so I was like, okay, cool, and it's the title track to the record. It wasn't my first choice for a single, but the record company felt like really strongly about it, and I was cool with that, and it's a cool, powerful track. Um, and then the next single's coming out fairly soon, and so we have like a handful of no like the next three singles will be some of the other tracks. But I there's a ton of strong tunes on the record, so I was fine with that.
Yeah, so I know obviously you have your singer for this, like the lyrics. Does the singer write 100% the lyrics, or some other people in the band also contribute?
Like I write, like I wrote all the music and I have everything arranged. But then Joe Amore, the singer, wrote the majority of the lyrics and melody lines. But Mark Cross, he recorded the vocals. Mark Cross, the drummer, he recorded the vocals at Mark's studio. So Mark helped contribute to the lyric writing and helped contribute to like helping shaping a bunch of the melodies as well, and helping him compose the melodies. So the two of them kind of work together on it. But like Joe would have like a definitive sketch of like the track, but then Mark would make different suggestions and change some melody lines and maybe change some lyrics here and there, and that they kind of put it together themselves.
So yeah, no, you work on the music and you give it to them, and that way you have, guys come up with lyrics.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I never write like anytime I work with a singer, I kind of do it the way Blackmore would or Schenker would, where I let the like some of the melodies will be implied by what I'm playing on the guitar, of course, but I let the singer write the lyrics and the melody lines.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So when you're like writing the music for this, what's your approach to like doing music like structurally wise? How do you like to compose the music?
It just kind of like a lot of times, anytime I write something, it just kind of organically comes to me where I don't like sit down with my guitar and say, okay, time to write a tune. I'm just playing and I'm working on and I'm just practicing and playing and and then all of a sudden, something organically comes to me. Could be a riff, and then like let's say I have this riff and then maybe like okay well I have this riff laying around and then I have it laying around for a few weeks but then I don't write the verse part until like another week after that so sometimes a track will come together all at once like Heat of the Night came together fairly I think I wrote that all in one shot, you know what I mean. I was at a friend of mine's house and I just started playing and I wrote the I was just visiting and I was practicing and then it just kind of came to me and I wrote the whole tune like right on the spot like that.
Yeah, so it just came to you. Sometimes the inspiration comes quickly. Sometimes it takes time.
Yeah, sometimes I might have something laying around and then I marry something else to it perfectly, a week later, a month later, or whatever. Sometimes the whole track just falls together like like right there and stuff. Me, I always let the music go. I always let the music go where I always go where the music takes me, as it says. You know what I mean? I don't force anything. It's got to come to me organically. I got to hear it in my head and feel it. It's not like I'm putting it together mathematically. It's very organic.
Okay. So was there a track on this record that maybe gave you it didn't come to you that quickly that you had to like sit on it and maybe rework it like a most difficult one?
No, usually when I write stuff, I don't overthink it a ton. I'm not like somebody that writes something and then I'm like continuously tweaking it or whatever. Usually my first instincts are the best instincts. So I just kind of put everything together. It just kind of comes together and then and granted, like I said, some things come together faster than others, but there wasn't anything that was giving me a like particularly hard time or anything like that. I remember, I remember writing Trust Me. Like my parents live in Florida, and like it was around the holidays, and I was out by the I was visiting, and I was out by the pool practicing. You know what I mean? And I wrote the whole tune just sitting outside, like you know. In the screened-in porch by the pool, playing, and the whole thing came together. So a lot of times, like a lot of times stuff comes together here in my workroom, or sometimes you never know what it could happen at any time. I got a guitar in my hands.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like you have a process that it's like, when it comes and you don't overthink it. And it's good because sometimes I talk to people that I think overthink things a lot. And sometimes when you overthink, maybe you like tweak something that didn't need tweaking.
Yeah, usually my first instincts are the strongest ones. I mean, sometimes I'll do things like to the arrangements, like maybe short. Oh well, I'll but a lot of times in Pro Tools you can do that where okay, well I'm going to shorten the intro riff, like instead of letting it go 4 times, I'm going to let it go 3 times, or different. I might cut like different things of the arrangement, but I don't like all of a sudden start to micromanage the tune and pick it apart. I just let it go where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, no, that seems like a good way to approach it. It seems like, it's more. easygoing, like go with the flow. How long was the actual production and recording of all the songs?
Well, it's hard to say because like I recorded a lot of the guitars and wrote a lot of the guitars quite a while ago, but then by the time I got it to the rest of the players, and then by the time they finished their parts, and by the time we managed to do the vocals, and then by the time we finally mixed the record and then found a home for the record, it was a it was a period of like of quite a while. So it wasn't like a normal production where okay, I record all the guitars, or most of the guitars for the record, and then I send them off to the guys for them to put their parts on it and stuff. I had like most of the record already recorded myself before anybody even got to any of it.
Yeah. So Joe, for someone that's been around the music industry so many years, how would you say for like, do you enjoy more like how you work on music now than back in the day, or is the stuff that you miss from the old school days?
Well, I don't miss recording in a studio. I like recording guitars at home because a lot of times with a studio, I remember I would be making records like let's say my early solo records, and when I was recording in a studio and recording on 2-inch tape, long before Pro Tools and all that kind of stuff. Um, you would have the studio booked, but like all of a sudden it's like what if you kind of beat up that day and you're a little tired or you're not completely inspired or whatever, you know what I mean? Well, you got no choice, you got to muster it up because you got the studio booked all day, you know what I mean? So I don't miss that at all. Or you're playing a solo and you're sitting there on the couch in the studio. Have I played great solos on the couch in the studio and inspired solos? Yes, I played a ton of them, but I prefer recording at home. It's much more then thing I can just like record in my modest home setup, and when inspiration strikes, be able to do it. So I love that aspect of it. I mean, I do love it. Was cool, recording when you were actually playing with the players in the same room. That was always cool. Like one thing I would do years ago was we'd be recording just the bass and drums, but then I'd have a guitar, I'd have a Marshall mic'd up, and I'm recording what they call a scratch track, meaning I'm not going to keep it. I'm just using it as a reference. But then since the tone's already mic'd up and it's really good, a lot of times you can get a killer take because you're not you're a bit more relaxed because you're not even think that it's going to be kept. Plus, you're playing with a higher level of intensity because you're interacting with the other players. So there's been records where I've gotten great takes of parts and solos through playing with the other players in the band and recording at the same time. So that aspect of it's very very cool, but it's not unless you're a huge band, that's not really really feasible in this day and age.
Yeah, plus I'm guessing that doing it yourself and doing stuff at home, you don't have that pressure that okay, I got booked this studio for these hours. I gotta come up with something. If not, I'm losing money.
Yeah. Well. In the old days, like when like Purple would go in to record a record, and or Rainbow would go in to record a record, and maybe Richie had like a handful of riffs here and there, or maybe he didn't have much of anything, and it would just start to. When would everything start to happen? When they got there, like reading various books about the making of some of those Rainbow records, where they would just kind of where they would just kind of wake up and and hang out and then go to the pub and then and then not work that day or whatever, because they'd had the money in the studio rented out for such a lengthy period of time.
Yeah, and I remember also like 20 years ago, there was also something that bands like rented houses and built like studio houses to do records like that. They would take like a summer or something like that. But the good thing is you've seen like the whole evolution of the music industry. So
Yeah, yeah. Like the very first record I made, I was in a band. I was in a metal band called Trash Broadway, and we made the record. We made the record up in Nevessa Sound in Woodstock, New York, which is kind of near the famous studio Bearsville, and it was a house. And they had the studio, they had the control room and the main room of the studio downstairs, and then upstairs they had bedrooms, and then they had a full kitchen and all that kind of stuff. And so we lived there for like 10 days and recorded all the tracks for the record.
yeah, that's cool. You know, you've experienced the different ways. So plus, I'm just you have must have some cool stories from all those recordings back in
Yeah,
the day.
yes, I remember when I was recording that Trash Broadway record in Woodstock, New York, up there. I remember, I was in the studio, recording guitars, and I was sitting in the control room, and this gentleman walked in, this rock-looking dude with long blonde hair, and he had like a black T-shirt and black shorts on, and it was, and I met him, and he was very nice. It was Mick Ronson. It was the late great Mick Ronson, that obviously played with famous for his years with the Spider, with Ziggy and the Spiders, with Bowie. And so that was very cool. And then we were busy recording, but then Mick Ronson, it's looking back, we should have taken him up on it. He invited us to a barbecue. It's like, hey, Mick Ronson wants it, but we were busy tracking it. It was very cool.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. It sounds like it would have been cool to go to a barbecue, but you were focused like playing. So I want to show the artwork of your new album that's coming out, and it's coming out on July 4th. So perfect for the holiday weekend. Uh,
Exactly. I think that's just an irony.
it's yeah. So okay, here we have Joe Stump's Tower Babel. Here's the Days of Thunder, the artwork. Tell me a little bit about what you guys, you were going for with the artwork.
Well, I really, the tower is just part of, the actual tower itself has just been in the, like in the band's backdrop and all that kind of stuff. And Mark Cross, the drummer, but Mark was much more. I'm pretty easy going. Where for me, it's like just make it look really cool. You know what I mean? Like send me that something that looks badass and cool. Where Mark was very particular about like colors and the concept, and plus he had like that character that's at the bottom there, by the opening of the tower, where he was almost thinking conceptually, it almost be like Eddie is with Iron Maiden, where it would show up on like every cover and like various incarnations and stuff like that. When it comes to the artwork, Joe Mello did the artwork. He's done a bunch of my covers, and he's done tons of covers for tons of metal bands. He's an outstanding artist, and so Mark worked quite a bit with him. And Mark was really quite specific. And he enjoyed like I'm more focused on myself. I'm like one of those people that's more focused on the music, and a lot of the other types of things, like some of the business ends of things and like stuff like helping with the art direction, I leave up to some of the other guys in the band. And Mark loves all that stuff, and he's quite good at it, in addition to being a powerhouse drummer. So I give him all the credit on the cover.
Yeah, no, it's a cool album artwork, and it goes with the music, that
Yeah,
classic.
and very much suits the music. That's the most important part. Like you take it, you listen to the record, you see the cover, you listen to the record. It all it's all one cohesive thing.
Exactly. So that once the album is out on July 4th, what plans do you have with the guys? Are you gonna be playing some shows? What's next for the band?
shows maybe not right away. Mysterio, the keyboard player. Like I have like some touring with Alcatraz later on. Later on this year, and Mysteria's got some. He plays with Bruce Dickinson's Mandrake project, so he's got some touring with Bruce going on. But then after the dust settles, Tower of Babel's talking about putting a bunch of European shows together at some point soon. So that'll be in the cards for the future.
Awesome. So I know the album is going to be out on the 4th, so I'll put if people want to pre-order the vinyl, CDs, everything, I'll put the link down below. So before I let you go, Joe, anything that you'd like to say to the fans before we go?
Just anybody that's like supported some of my releases in the past, thank you very much. I appreciate the support. And if you're a fan of Deep Purple, if you're a fan of Rainbow, if you're a fan of classic European hard rock and metal, then you're gonna love this record. I guarantee it. And so by all means, check it out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That if you like that classic European sounding metal, you will dig Joe Stump's Tower of Babel. So, Joe, thank you for taking some time of your day to chat with me. Plus, you got that cool looking like rock star. Like it's cool like when you talk to someone and they have the look.
Yeah, well, this is the way I dress like pretty much every day. I go to the store like this. You know what I mean? So it's not like the only time I'm like in sweats and like a t-shirt or something is when I'm working out or something like that. Like I went out today and walked a couple miles, so I wasn't doing that, and like dressed like this with my jewelry on, and my boots on. You know what I mean? So I had some sneakers going and some sweats and stuff. Because I try to keep in shape. Turn the clock back if you can.
It's good. Do you get recognized when you go out sometimes?
No, 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 not really. Occasionally, you know what I mean. Occasionally, people will see me. Or sometimes, like one time I was driving. I think I was in Connecticut, and I was like, I'm from New York, but I live in Massachusetts. I live right outside of Boston now, and I was driving from New York to back this way, and I was in Connecticut, and I was in, like, of all places, I was in like a rest area, using the restroom off the highway, and some guy I had just finished washing my hands in the bathroom, and some guy is like, "Hey, Joe Stump, do you mind if I get a picture?" It was like the most random thing. So it happens occasionally. You know what I mean? Or like or occasionally somebody say to somebody that knows me, "Hey, I think I saw Nikki Sixx at the liquor store," and I'm like, "Nah, that's Joe Stuff." You know what I mean?
Oh, Nikki. Well, but Nikki has more tattoos. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. We really don't look anything alike. Exactly.
He's
You know?
full of tattoos. But at least the guy in the restroom had the decency of you waiting for you to wash your hands, because you might were like at that moment peeing and the guy's like, "Hey, Joe Stump."
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. No, 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 it wasn't. No, it was fine. It was like it was no problem. I'm always nice to people when they approach me like that. After a show or after shows or whatever, or like any of that kind of stuff. It's all part of the job. You know what I mean? Like if you don't like that kind of thing, you should really get into like another line of work.
I agree, I agree. So, Joe, thank you for taking some time to chat with me. It's been fun. So, Couchers, the new Joe Stump album, Tower of Battle, out July the 4th. I'll put the link for people who want to pre-order it, however you consume your music. So, until next time, Couchers, this Hector, the Shield Dude on a couch, and I'll see you all right here on the couch. Thank you, and goodbye.